So first of all, my name is Dahryn Trivedi. I am the co-founder of Divine Connection. I'm very happy to be speaking to all of you today because I have something that's never been seen before. I'm telling you right now, this is not something you will see anywhere else. We have a problem. I'm very happy to have followed that lecture beforehand because it's true. Mental health is a very serious problem. In fact, over 1 billion people are on medication. And there are billions of people who are truly on the borderline. They found that though the stigma of mental health is lessening, more people are talking about it, more people are discussing it than ever before. Studies have found that the actual number of problems are not decreasing, they're increasing. Now, I have a question. Why are all of us here? What's the point of having a conference like this? We could say maybe we're here because we want to share some new technology and innovation. Maybe we're here for marketing, to make connections. Maybe shameless self-promotion, that's fine too. Maybe we're here because we have a new idea. We're thought leaders. Ultimately, we can conclude that all of us are here because we are driven by one thing: purpose. Purpose is very essential to human life. You cannot have life without purpose. And this is something that is inherent to nature. This is not something that's unique to humankind. Rather, this is something that was created through nature itself. The inherent need to improve upon life. We see this through evolution. We see this in animals, in their migratory patterns. We see this in plants and trees. We see everything moves in the direction that promotes its growth, that promotes life. Everything moves in the direction where it has the greatest nutritional reward. You see plants actually turn and move in the direction of the sun because they get energy from the sun. Everything moves in the direction that promotes its life. And we also see something else. We also see that if there is a poison in our environment, if there's something that's inharmonious to our growth, we see life stops progressing in that direction. Life stops moving forward. Now, I'm here to present an idea to you. But this is more than just a theory. This is a scientifically proven reality, a clinically proven reality. What I'm here to share you is that what we see in nature, what we see that it's inherent to the human condition and human life itself, is that it is natural and it is normal to live a life of happiness and of success. Science calls this following the path of least resistance, but we can see this is following the path of greatest growth. Now, we can also see that a lack of success, unhappiness, frustration, unproductive struggle is not natural and it's not normal. Now, if this is true in nature, what does this tell us about the current state of the world and humanity? What direction are we headed in our lives that mental health is at such a huge crisis today? That we are suffering and struggling, spinning in the same place over and over and over again. Maybe it isn't necessarily the direction we're going per se. Maybe it's that we don't truly understand human nature. What a human really is. And it's pointless to have discussions and to talk about it if we don't even know what that means. What is a human? What is the process of well-being? How does well-being even happen? Science has no answers to mental health, not really. If you take a drug for anxiety or depression, right, you're dependent upon that drug. If you stop taking it, the anxiety and the depression return, right? If that was an answer, if that was a cure, you wouldn't be dependent upon the medication to have good mental health, would you? A lot of what science does is it masks the symptoms. It makes us numb to the problem without actually treating the root cause of the problem. And science admits that its understanding of human emotion and mental health is very poor. It's well aware of this fact. It's not hiding it. It admits it freely to the world. In fact, if you were to talk to any neuroscientist, they would say that the human mind is one of the greatest resources we have, and at the same time, it's the most difficult thing to map. It's the most difficult thing to measure. If you were to take all the supercomputers in the entire world and use them all to map out one human brain, it would not be enough. Just one human brain. Can you imagine, with all the advancements of science, how much work it still has to go forward to understand mental health and emotional health? Now, the answer to this problem with science and traditional medicine has been wellness. We're all a part of it, the wellness industry, well-being. Now, we think that the pharmaceutical industry is a very profitable business. Well, you should look at the wellness industry. The wellness industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that's 4 times larger than the global pharmaceutical industry. 4 times larger, and it's growing. So people are understanding that science has limitations. And so they're seeking other things, other resources, other possibilities to try and find an answer, to try and find a solution. But if there was a solution in all these modalities and all these other treatments out there, then you think that the numbers of mental health would be decreasing. And we see the exact opposite. And in fact, the danger of the wellness industry is that because science is not able to accurately measure and depict human emotion and the mind, that the wellness industry is free of science. So what reigns supreme? Pseudoscience, magic, personal anecdotes, stories. This is a huge problem. In fact, who knows, maybe some parts of the wellness industry are contributing to mental illness instead of alleviating the problem. Now, to answer the problem, we have to first and foremost understand what a human is. We understand that we have these inherent characters, that a human being is not just a physical body, that there's very much a mind and an emotional component that gives us this conscious experience. And though science cannot measure it, science has accepted that it's real, because science will always accept something when it sees an impact. It might not be able to measure it, understand the process in the same way that science doesn't necessarily understand gravity yet. A lot of it is still theoretical, but science can see an apple fall from a tree and conclude that there is a power, there is an energy, there is a process behind that. So in the same way, science understands that emotions, right, this mental aspect of life is very much inherent to us, just as our own physical bodies are. But it doesn't necessarily understand its nature, its function, the process behind it, where these thoughts and emotions truly come from. What is the point of having emotions? What is life telling us through our emotions? Now, these inherent characters are characters such as compassion, love, affection, empathy, sympathy, caring, sacrifice. And these characters, they ultimately guide our behavior. They instruct the personality to manifest into whatever we see today. It could be a behavior of someone who's dishonest, someone who is a person of commitment, somebody who is responsible, someone who's prone to violence. And the unfortunate thing is you see a lot of people focused on behavior-based methods to treat these inherent characters, when it's the inherent characters that determine behavior. Now, if we go into neuroscience, neuroscience says that first and foremost, the brain must be orderly in order for thoughts to be orderly. And thoughts and emotions are intertwined. And for thoughts to be orderly, then our actions are orderly. It does not work the other way around. So you understand that to change thoughts, to have power over the mind, to have power over our emotions, to control our beliefs and the things that ultimately make the largest impact in our lives and the choices we make in our relationships, in our success, in our vitality, in our health, we cannot change things at a behavior-based level. We have to go down to the very source of it, which is the mind, the brain. Now, how do we change the brain? We need to have access to the faculty that created the mind to begin with. We need to be able to change the actual components that compose the brain. How hard is that to do? Think of it. You can't force love. Nobody can decide one day just to suddenly love someone. To make love happen is a very difficult thing to do. It's something that happens naturally. You can't persuade yourself to love someone. It's something that is inherent to you. Emotions are byproducts of the mind. So, if we need to understand what creates the mind and what determines our thoughts and our emotions, we need to understand that, first of all, what is a human? Now, there are three different interpretations of what a human is. We have science, we have religion, and we have spirituality. Science says that a human being is the brain and the body, the mind and the body. Science says that we are the mind, body, and spirit, or the soul. And spirituality says that we are the mind, the body, and consciousness. Now, if you're to look at these factors, you understand that science can neither accept nor deny the presence of the soul. Why can't science accept the presence of the soul? It can't deny it because it can't prove whether it exists or doesn't. It can't measure it, so there's no way to determine if it's there. But we are able to measure our own emotions and our own mental state by the impact it has in our lives. We experience it. We have a conscious experience of our emotions. So science accepts its existence. However, it's very difficult for science to accept the existence of the soul because how many of us have a conscious experience of our own souls? How many of us have the conscious experience of the effect that consciousness and a change in consciousness has in our lives? It makes it very difficult for science to accept it as a possibility. But what brings us to the attention of spirit and the soul? What major life event guides us back to that nature and makes us question our very reality, the fundamentals of who we are? Death. Dying. That we understand, we start to question human life when we question human death. Now, what is death? Science still doesn't quite understand why people die or why people even age. There's no reason for aging. There's no real reason for death, and yet it is a natural process of life. If you're to look at someone who has died, you understand that everything within the body stops functioning. Science is able to see this and recognize it, and so science is able to then take these organs and transplant them into a living human being, like the eyes, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the liver. And then magically, they start functioning again. So science has actually hypothesized something, that there must be some kind of factor X that operates the brain, which is also an organ, as well as the rest of the body, that is present in a living body but is not present in a dead body. And it calls this factor X because it can't call it the soul, right? It starts to merge into spirituality and religion, and we know the conflict between those two. Now, if we look at this in the perspective of religion, we see that this is the presence and absence of spirit, of the soul. And spirituality recognizes it as the presence and absence of consciousness. Now, if we were to accept this factor X as possibly being the soul, what does that mean? That means that in order to operate and get full efficiency out of the functioning of the human body, the mental body and the emotional body, we need to have an effect on the brain. And the thing that orchestrates the organ and the functioning of that organ is ultimately the soul. There is nothing on this planet available today that is capable of empowering the soul. There is no modality, there is no drug, there is no therapy, there is no essential oil or crystal you can rub on your body that can empower your soul and raise your consciousness. Nature strictly controls and regulates everything within a given set of parameters. Everything is tightly controlled by nature so that the earth continues to spin on its axis. So that, the chemicals in the body stay within a certain limit. Otherwise, we would die. We won't be able to sustain this life form. Nature controls everything. We can consider that nature has consciousness because nature and life, we are nature, and we have consciousness. So if we wanted to impact the soul, let's think, for example, where did this idea of the soul even come from? Where did this concept, where did this arise in common terminology? Where did it come from in terms of religion? How did it become a word that we refer to today? If you look at the source of all religions, you see that ultimately there is an enlightened one, someone who is connected to God, to the divine, to that universal authority that creates all human life and sustains it and can take it away. And we understand that the enlightened can sense the soul, and they can understand the impact the soul and consciousness has in our day-to-day lives. Why? Because their consciousness exceeds the consciousness of nature. If your consciousness exceeds the consciousness of nature, then you can surely change nature. You can change natural laws. And this, believe it or not, can be scientifically proven. This is not a theory or a philosophy or a religious dogma. This is a scientific truth that someone who truly has a consciousness higher than nature, that exists outside of the bounds of nature, can change the laws of nature. If that were true, then that would be the cause and that would be the effect. That means an enlightened being can create new materials. They can create new species. They can change the structure of the atom. Now, it makes you wonder, what science I have today that can support those statements? Has this been proven? Can enlightened consciousness actually do these things? Is this possible? Well, I'm not coming forward to you on this stage with this confidence because I'm empty-handed. Over 2 decades of research, with over 6,000 science experiments in life sciences and material sciences, in universities all over the world, more than 650 publications in peer-reviewed science journals, available in over 2,000 universities in over 130 countries. And I'm not talking about small universities, I'm talking about Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, MIT. I'm talking the National Institutes of Health, have all indexed these science papers, demonstrating that enlightened consciousness can change the structure of the atom, that enlightened consciousness can change all living organisms and non-living materials at a DNA level, at a material and atomic level, and they can all be measured and quantified in a scientific laboratory. Now, on top of that, what does this have to do with mental health? What is changing the structure of the atom? What do all these things have to do with well-being? Well, all of these studies, all of this work, all of this research has culminated into this. This, what I have before you today, is one of 3 publications in peer-reviewed science journals on our clinical trial on the impact of divine grace, divine blessing on the empowerment of the soul and how it consequentially affects human life and well-being. This is a 6-month clinical trial. It has a placebo group, it has a control group, and it has a treated group. All testing the psychological effects of mental health. And here I'm telling you that the results are unprecedented and something you'll never hear of. That hormones, oxytocin was increased by nearly 200%. Neurotransmitters, brain chemicals, and I'll be wrapping this up in a minute. Dopamine increased by nearly 422%. Immunity markers improved by 25%. Oxidative stress, 65%. Anti-aging markers enhanced by nearly 700%. Nutrient absorption, vitamins D3, C, B12 increased by 65%, 57%, and 15% respectively. Insulin improved by 88%, cholesterol, LDL reduced by 30%, inflammatory markers reduced by 95%. These are just a few out of 100 blood parameters that we measured and compared with a placebo and a control group. Now, let's just point out the last point real quick, inflammation. We know, as Sadhvi said, how significant inflammation is to the many prevalent disorders that there are today, many of our health problems. You can understand that chronic inflammation plays an important role in the development of Alzheimer's, in cancer, in diabetes, in neurological disorders, multiple sclerosis, cancer, many of the problems that we see so commonly today. This is done through divine blessing. This was not done through any behavior, by changing anything at a habitual level, by giving them a drug or a hormone or anything. This was strictly done through a divine blessing administered through enlightened consciousness. This is evidence that it is the soul, the empowerment of the soul that impacts every aspect of our life. Anxiety, depression, stress, poor quality sleep, poor relationships, financial struggle, every aspect of life. And if we can empower the soul, we can empower our lives to live a quality life and a life worth living. So science is missing the soul, and we need to put the soul back into science. So, thank you.